Adrian stopped wearing his wedding ring on Thursdays. I noticed it 3 weeks before I noticed anything else. The ring always returned by dinner, resting naturally against his hand, while he cut vegetables for our daughters or carried plates into the kitchen. Most people would not have paid attention to something so small, but small changes had a way of growing larger once you saw them clearly. That Thursday morning, rain moved softly across the windows while Elia searched for her history notebook under the couch cushions. Noah sat at the counter eating strawberries one piece at a time, leaving pink fingerprints across the marble surface. Adrian stood beside the coffee machine, scrolling through his phone with unusual concentration. When he realized I was watching him, he locked the screen. Then he smiled. The expression arrived a little too late. I poured coffee into 2 cups while Adrian checked his watch again. Lately, Thursdays had become structured around invisible urgency. Earlier meetings, downtown clients, sudden schedule changes. The explanations shifted slightly every week, but the feeling underneath them stayed the same. Noah dropped a strawberry onto the floor and laughed when the dog stole it before anyone could react. Adrian laughed too, though his attention drifted back toward the phone beside the coffee machine almost immediately. I noticed things like that automatically. Before having children, I spent 6 years working for a private investigation company that specialized in financial fraud and identity tracing. Most cases began with ordinary inconsistencies, a repeated payment, a changed routine, someone looking away half a second too quickly. After the girls left for school, the house settled into silence. Adrian collected his car keys from the hallway table while adjusting the sleeves of his dark gray coat. The scent of unfamiliar cologne followed him through the room. Expensive, clean, not the brand he usually wore. He kissed my forehead before leaving. 5 seconds later, his phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. He had forgotten it. I stared at the screen lighting up beside the fruit bowl. Adrian never forgot his phone. He carried it everywhere, even between rooms. Last winter, he brought it outside while taking garbage bags to the curb. Another message appeared before the screen dimmed again. Same place. Noon. No name attached. Just those words sitting quietly in my kitchen. I should have left the phone alone. Decent marriages depended on trust, and decent wives did not search through private messages because of one strange feeling. At least that was what I had spent months telling myself while our conversations became shorter and our silences grew longer. I picked up the phone anyway. The passcode was still our anniversary. That hurt more than I expected. Inside the messages, almost everything had been deleted. What remained looked careful. Meeting times, addresses, brief confirmations. Whoever Adrian was speaking to understood how to leave very little behind. But one detail stood out immediately. Every message arrived on Thursdays. Headlights crossed the front windows suddenly. I placed the phone back beside on the fruit bowl, seconds before Adrian walked through the door looking irritated with himself. "I forgot my phone," he said quickly. I watched relief loosen his shoulders when he saw it untouched on the counter. Then he left again. The house felt different after that. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, wiping counters that were already clean. Outside, rainwater gathered along the edge of the driveway while a delivery truck stopped briefly across the street. Everything around me looked painfully normal. Still, something inside me had shifted. By noon, I was sitting inside my car across from a narrow cafe downtown, watching Adrian through the front window. He sat beside a woman with dark hair twisted into a loose knot at the back of her neck. A cigarette rested untouched between her fingers while she slid a folder across the table toward him. Adrian looked tense at first. Then she said something that made him laugh quietly into his coffee cup. I had not seen that version of his face in months. Not younger, lighter. The woman touched his wrist briefly while speaking. The movement lasted only a second, but it carried familiarity. Not excitement, not seduction. Something calmer than that. Practice. Outside, buses pushed rainwater across the street while people hurried past carrying umbrellas and paper bags. Nobody noticed my marriage changing behind cafe glass. Adrian reached toward the folder again. Instead, the woman handed him a small silver key. I frowned immediately. A key complicated things. Affairs made emotional sense. Secret dinners, hotel rooms, hidden apartments. But keys belonged to arrangements built for repetition, structure, planning. I stayed there another 20 minutes before they finally stood to leave. The woman exited first. Adrian waited exactly 1 minute before following separately, not casually. Carefully, I followed the woman instead. She crossed 2 streets without once checking behind herself before entering a modern apartment building near the river. Glass balconies overlooked the water below, and a private security door blocked the entrance, the kind of building designed for people who valued privacy more than comfort. She disappeared inside. For several seconds, I sat gripping the steering wheel while rain tapped softly against the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive home and force everything back into normal shape. Pick up groceries, help with homework, pretend this afternoon never happened. But denial only worked temporarily. Problems ignored early usually return sharper later. My phone buzzed suddenly against the passenger seat. Adrian. I watched his name glow across the screen before answering. His voice sounded warm and familiar. He asked if I could stop by the school supply store before dinner because Noah needed materials for a class project. In the background, I heard cafe dishes clinking softly. I looked toward the apartment building entrance while listening to my husband lie to me with complete calm. Then I answered the same way I had answered him for years, gently, like I still believed him. Before I share the rest of story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. Adrian came home after 9, carrying Thai food and a bottle of red wine. Rain still clung to the shoulders of his coat when he stepped into the kitchen. The girls ran toward the paper bags immediately, excited by the smell of noodles and coconut soups drifting through the room. Adrian smiled at them easily while unpacking containers onto the counter, watching him hurt in a confusing way because nothing about his affection looked forced. He remembered that Ilya hated onions. He separated Noah's noodles before adding sauce because spicy food made her cry. He moved naturally through the kitchen, touching shoulders gently as he passed behind us. If I had not followed him earlier, I would have believed everything was fine. During dinner, Noah balanced pieces of rice into tiny towers beside her plate while Adrian listened to Ilya complain about a group project at school. He laughed at the correct moments, asked questions, refolded a napkin that kept slipping from Noah's lap. Then his phone vibrated inside his coat pocket. The reaction came instantly. His hand moved toward the pocket before the sound had fully stopped. Only a small movement, but enough. Adrian checked the screen while pretending to reach for more water. When he noticed me watching him across the table, he locked the phone immediately. "Work," he said. The words settled between us quietly. After dinner, the girls disappeared upstairs to brush their teeth while Adrian loaded dishes into the dishwasher beside me. We moved around each other with familiar timing developed over years of marriage. He rinsed plates while I wrapped leftovers. He handed me containers before I reached for them. Routine survived even when trust did not. "You've been quiet tonight," he said finally. I kept my attention on the refrigerator shelves. "Long day." He studied me for a moment longer than usual. I could feel it without turning around. Then he nodded once and closed the dishwasher. Later that night, after everyone slept, I opened my old investigation laptop for the first time in years. Dust lined the edges of the keyboard. The wallpaper still showed a photograph from a conference in Prague taken before Ilya was born. Back then, my work involved tracing fraudulent accounts and missing financial transfers for private firms. Most cases looked ordinary from the outside until patterns connected quietly beneath them. I searched the apartment building first. The ownership records led through 3 separate shell companies registered overseas. Legal, technically, but intentionally difficult to trace. Wealthy people used structures like that for privacy sometimes. Criminal networks used them too. I leaned closer toward the screen. Then I searched the silver logo printed on the folder from the cafe. Vale & Shore International, no website, no employee records, no public contact information, nothing. A cold feeling spread slowly through my chest. Invisible companies usually wanted to remain invisible for a reason. I continued searching until midnight before finding an archived article from a financial newspaper in Berlin. Most of the original page had already been removed, but fragments remained cached online. One sentence stopped me immediately. Several consulting intermediaries were suspected of moving funds through architectural development firms connected to Eastern Europe. Architectural development firms, Adrian's company. I read the line again while wind pressed tree branches softly against the windows outside. Upstairs, floorboards creaked gently near the girls' bedrooms. Familiar sounds, ordinary sounds. Yet suddenly the house no longer felt safe. I printed the article quickly after hearing movement upstairs. A moment later, Adrian appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing Gray's sweatpants and rubbing sleep from his eyes. For one terrible second, I thought he had seen the printer pages beside my hand. Instead, he walked toward the kettle. "Couldn't sleep," he said quietly. Neither could I. The space between us felt different now, sharper somehow. I noticed details I had ignored for months. The tired skin beneath his eyes. The way he checked the dark window over the sink before turning around. The hesitation inside his movements whenever silence lasted too long. Adrian filled the kettle twice before realizing it was already full. That frightened me more than if he had shouted. He glanced toward the laptop. "You using that thing again?" His tone sounded casual, but the question arrived too quickly. "Just cleaning old files," he nodded slowly. Steam rose between us as the kettle warmed. Then Adrian surprised me by touching my arm lightly. "I know I've been distracted lately," he said. "Work has become complicated. Complicated, not stressful, not busy. Complicated." I looked at him carefully for the first time that night. There was exhaustion in his face now. Real exhaustion. Not guilt, exactly. Something heavier. Like someone carrying too many doors inside his mind at once. Years ago, Adrian used to fall asleep halfway through films with one hand resting on my knee. We spent entire weekends painting the girls' bedrooms before they were born, because he refused to hire strangers for something he considered important. Those memories made this harder. People liked believing betrayal came from bad marriages. Often, it arrived inside marriages that still contained love somewhere underneath the damage. Before returning upstairs, Adrian kissed my forehead softly. The same gesture from that morning. The same warmth, and somehow completely different now. After he disappeared upstairs, I reopened the Berlin article and continued reading the missing fragments below the main report. 3 executives connected to the investigation had vanished before charges were filed. Vanished. Not arrested. Not questioned. Gone. A chill moved through me despite the warm kitchen. I looked toward the dark hallway leading upstairs to my bedrooms. Then I walked quietly through the house, locking every door before trying to sleep. The next Thursday, Adrian left the house without touching his breakfast. That alone unsettled me. For years, his mornings followed the same quiet order. Coffee first, toast second, news headlines while standing near the kitchen island. Even during arguments, those routines stayed intact. But that morning, the coffee cooled untouched beside his hand. Elia noticed immediately. "Are you sick?" she asked while pulling on her school shoes near the door. Adrian smiled too quickly. "Just tired." His voice sounded normal, but his hands kept moving, adjusting his watch, rechecking his wallet, looking toward the windows every few seconds. Outside, cold sunlight spread weakly across the driveway after days of rain. The brightness should have made the house feel lighter. Instead, everything looked exposed. After the girls left for school, I stood at the sink, staring at Adrian's untouched coffee cup. A thin layer of cream had settled across the surface. Something had changed overnight. I waited until the school crossing lights disappeared from the end of the street before opening my laptop again. Every instinct told me to stop digging deeper. Whatever surrounded Adrian already felt dangerous enough. But uncertainty had its own kind of cruelty. It spread into ordinary moments until everything became infected by suspicion. I searched Vale and Shore through older international databases this time. That was how I found Corinne. Her name appeared briefly inside an archived legal discussion connected to financial investigations in Germany. Corinne Hale, former fraud investigator. I had not spoken to her in nearly 7 years, but seeing her name felt strangely grounding. During my investigation days, Corinne trained me to look past dramatic explanations and study patterns instead. People reveal themselves through routine, she used to say, not through mistakes. I stared at her contact information for several minutes before sending a message. By noon, she called. Her voice sounded exactly the same. Calm, direct, controlled. I explained everything while sitting inside my parked car near the river downtown. Adrian, the apartment building, Vale and Shore, the article from Berlin. Corinne interrupted only to ask specific questions about payment structures and dates. When I finished speaking, silence settled briefly across the line. Then she asked something unexpected. Has Adrian been acting protective recently? I frowned. What do you mean? Changes around the house, she said quietly. Security habits, privacy concerns, anything unusual. Cold wind pushed against the side of my car while memories rearranged themselves inside my head. Adrian changing our alarm passwords twice in 1 month. Adrian insisting the girls stop posting photos online. Adrian checking parked cars outside our house before bed. At the time, I interpreted everything emotionally. Distance, irritation, secrecy. Now those same memories carried a different shape. Corinne asked me to send copies of the article and company records immediately. I forwarded everything from my phone while watching gray water move beneath the bridge nearby. 20 minutes later, she called again. This time, her voice sounded tighter. Selene, listen carefully, she said. You need to pick up your daughters early today. Fear moved through my chest so fast it felt physical. Why? I can't explain fully yet. But Vale and Shore appears inside an active laundering investigation connected to multiple countries. If Adrian became involved recently, there's a chance he's already under surveillance. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Are my girls in danger? The pause that followed frightened me more than words would have. I don't know. Those 4 words stayed with me the entire drive to the school. Children crossed sidewalks, carrying backpacks, while parents stood near the entrance, drinking coffee beneath pale afternoon sunlight. Everything looked painfully ordinary compared to the panic growing inside me. Noah smiled the moment she saw me waiting outside her classroom. Can we get cereal today? I almost laughed from relief hearing such a normal question. Yes, I said softly. On the drive home, Elia talked about a science presentation, while Nazoa searched grocery shelves for cereal shaped like stars. I let them choose strawberries even though we already had some at home. Small things suddenly felt important. Predictable things. Familiar things. I checked my phone constantly between aisles. No messages from Adrian. That worried me more. By evening, clouds had returned again, turning the windows dark long before sunset. The girls colored quietly on the living room floor while pasta boiled on the stove. Every passing car slowed my breathing for a second. At 7:30, Adrian finally came home. The moment he stepped inside, I understood Corinne had been right. He looked terrified, not nervous, not distracted, terrified. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat, and his breathing sounded uneven, like he had climbed stairs too quickly before entering the house. He locked the front door immediately behind himself and checked the street through the hallway window before speaking. The girls noticed his behavior instantly. Elia lowered her pencil slowly. Adrian forced a smile that disappeared almost immediately. Everything's okay, he said. Even Noah looked unconvinced. Later, after the girls went upstairs, Adrian stood alone near the kitchen counter with both hands pressed against the edge of the marble surface. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the neighborhood while water dripped steadily from his coat onto the floor. For the first time in months, there was no distance left inside his expression, only exhaustion. I made a mistake, he said quietly. The words settled heavily between us. Not an affair, not another excuse, something worse. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a small silver key onto the counter between us, the same key from the cafe. I need you to trust me for one more night, he said. I stared at the key while rain struck the windows harder outside. And somewhere upstairs, one of my daughters laughed in her sleep while our entire life quietly began coming apart. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. And tell me honestly, would you have trusted Adrian for one more night?